Committee of the Whole, review of the 2018 operating budget. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Wood.
Here.
Alder Kitzler.
Here.
Alder Court. Here. Alder Groupie. Here. Alder Moore.
Here.
Alder Spade.
Here.
Mayor O'Connor.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I guess we will move right away to the first item on our list, which is police and dispatch. Chief Ostrenga, and this is on pages, police is on 57 and dispatch is on 74.
Which one would you like to start with?
Whichever you're comfortable with.
Well, why don't we start with police?
Okay,
Which is on what page again? I'm sorry.
57.
And I'm here tonight with Lieutenant Weigel, who's the operations lieutenant, and Lieutenant Duman, who's sort of well, she is the investigations and also dispatch supervisor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chad, it used to be me. It used to be me. And Nate.
No.
Would you like it? Okay, so just to start, this will only take maybe 3 minutes or so. Kind of set the tone for the police operations budget. So our current staffing consists of 20 personnel, 1 chief, 2 lieutenants, 1 detective sergeant, 2 patrol sergeants, 1 detective, 1 school resource officer, which is 75% funded by the school district, 1 community resource officer, and 11 patrol officers. There was a staffing study, and I believe Mark emailed you guys out a copy of it. It looks like this today. Mm-hmm. This was done back in 2013 at the request of Mayor Miller. It's posted on our website. And basically, through attrition, we had gone from 20 down to 19 personnel, and we're trying to justify keeping our community relations officer. So he wanted an internal study completed externally on staffing. So we contacted Professor Fritsch out of the University of North Texas. He had done studies nationwide, and we were introduced to him by the Middleton Police Department. So there is a final copy of the 2014 study. But he did present to our Public Safety Committee in 2013. We had a meeting, and he Skyped in, and he did a remote PowerPoint. He talked about how his research team experience, talked about the method that he used, basically interviewed staff, reviewed documents, data, developed staffing models, and a review of nationally recognized best practices, and then he assessed all sworn positions. So what he came up with, built a map to establish concurrent validity. So MAP, which was on the cover of his report of the PowerPoint too, a map is basically a model for the allocation of police personnel. So what he did when he modified that is he wanted to increase self-initiated time, because when he did the study, he found that our officers only had 13% of their time not assigned to duties. And he wanted to increase that to 25% of shift time, which would meet the minimum norms established in prior research that he had done, but it was yet still below long-established national standards of 33% of a shift. And then he also factored in an additional 5% increase in calls for service over the next 5 years. So what he recommended was that we would have 17 patrol officers should be assigned to patrol by the end of fiscal year 2018, which was 6 above the current authorized strength. Patrol supervision, excuse me, back it up there. Patrol supervision, he's recommended increasing the number of patrol sergeants, 1 additional patrol sergeant, and that would be in fiscal 2017. Of course, we haven't accomplished really any of these things since the study was done, based on our constraints we have for finances. But a lot of things changed in 2013, 2014. Lieutenant Weigel was promoted to lieutenant on November 1st of 14. Sergeant Losby was made a detective sergeant on April 1st of 2013. Officer Wingy was promoted to sergeant on October 1st of 2014. Adam Knockrenner was promoted to sergeant on January 1st, 2015. This was due to personnel changes. But with all those changes, we still only have 2 patrol sergeants. Criminal investigations, he felt that based on the case assignment, we were adequately staffed for the next 5 years, but keep in mind that this report was done 5 years ago. Community relations staffing, this was what justified us keeping our community relations position. Officer Ryder was assigned as the community relations officer on July 1st of 2014. He generally works an 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. shift, but he frequently flexes his schedule for special events, such as this last Saturday, he came in to do the drug drop-off. He fills shifts for patrol and dispatch. Officer Wunsch was assigned to the school on June 10th of 2016. And of course, his salary is paid 75% of the school district, by the school district. This is an interesting one. This compares our calls for service. Calls for service are basically everything an officer does. It's writing tickets, responding to calls, initiating activity, and it compares us with our partners with the MPSIS group, Fitchburg, Middleton, Sun Prairie, and Verona. It shows 2013 through 2017 numbers. So it has the population of each jurisdiction, the number of police sworn officers. They compare sworn officers per 1,000, which we are high, but that's based on our call volume too. How many civilians actually work for the department, total calls for service, and then calls for service per sworn position. So in Monona in 2013, for 19 sworn positions, we had 17,457 calls for service, which came out to 918.7895 calls per sworn position. Then we had 880 in 2014, 848 in 2015, 840, 2016, 846 in 2017. You compare that to the other agencies, which are in the 400 and 500. Verona had 600 in 2016. So in 2017, Monona, 20 officers had averaged 846.95 calls per service. Fitchburg had 50 officers, they averaged 555. Middleton, 38 officers. Verona, 22 officers. I'm not going to read all those numbers, but you kind of get the gist of what I'm getting at. Here's another interesting chart. Here's some raw data that I had Sergeant Lasby put together. This is the 2016 comparison. So it has our population with Monona at the top. It has total calls for service, total number of traffic crashes, and total sworn. We averaged 840.8 calls per service. The city of Madison at the very bottom with 252,551 population, probably not counting the campus. They had 212,601 calls for service. Their 476 sworn officers averaged 446.64 annual calls for service per officer. So we do twice the work the city of Madison does with our officers as far as calls for service. To meet, when the average up all the departments, not including ours, it comes out to 490.16 calls for service per year per officer. To meet that average, we would have to add 14 new positions, which I don't see that happening. Basically, Monona officers have to do more with less than other area departments, and as the staffing study predicted, low priority calls, unobligated time, such as general patrol, radar, maintenance, special projects are all suffering for that. August 22nd, 2018, the Public Safety Committee reviewed the budget. They recommended adding 3 police officers to the 2019 operations budget. And our concern is that with continued development along the Broadway corridor, our annual calls for service is just going to increase. So that kind of sets the tone for our budget presentation here.
Just so you know, they recommended 3, we only put 1 in the budget. So there is 1 additional officer in the budget.
So going into the actual budget document, we try to put in here what we've accomplished through the year, what we're looking at, what our goals are. I'm not going to read this verbatim line for line. We'll just go on and on, but I'll just kind of skim over a couple things. Like on the first page of our documentation, I think it's page 58 on your, is that correct?
Yeah.
58. You know, continue to expand on cost-saving consolidation. You know, we try to work with other departments as much as possible. We've partnered with, like, our training group consists of McFarland, Verona, Oregon, Stoughton, and Monona. That's different from our sort of our IT group, which consists of Verona, Fitchburg, Sun Prairie, Middleton, and ourselves. I guess the IT, we're trying to grab onto the people that have more money so that we can get more benefit from what they're accomplishing. We try to seek as many grants as possible for specialized enforcement activities and equipment. Try to look for innovative and affordable ways to conserve energy. In our 2019 capital budget, we're looking to purchase 2 new cars. One will be a marked patrol unit and one will be a detective car. Both we expect will be hybrid vehicles. We're trying to follow the recommendations from the Special Community Task Force on use of force that was from 2016. And then, you know, based on number of calls for service, we really have to start looking at adding personnel, particularly with the development in the community. One of the goal achievements, well, some of the goal achievements, skipping up to page 60. You know, number one, talked about the staffing study that I just presented to you. After almost a 2-year wait, we received our body-worn cameras in 2016. Since then, in 2018, Panasonic replaced all those 2016 cameras at no charge, other than we had to buy new docking stations, as the new cameras have longer battery life and very improved, crisper video images. Some of the events we work on each year: Memorial Day Parade, 4th of July, Shake the Lake, National Night Out, Prescription Drug Drops, Shop with a Cop. We're involved in another Citizens Academy this year, partnering with McFarland Police Department. Talk about traffic grants, talk about retail theft, try to push out as much information as we can on Facebook and social media. In 2018, through the MPSIS group, we were able to add a second license plate recognition vehicle to a squad, and that is huge. With all I'm sure you're following all the stolen autos this last summer, and having those LPR units is really beneficial. On August 6th, City Attorney and I signed an agreement to actively participate in the Dane County Restorative Justice Program. To date, I'm not sure that we've had anyone go through the program. Sarah, do you?
Through circuit court, yes, we've had one, it's not municipal yet.
Okay. So basically, if we arrest someone between the ages of 17 and 25 and the charges get referred to the DA's office, through the DA's office, they can decide if they want to divert that person to the restorative justice. Instead of getting, it keeps them off CCAP, basically, and tries to mold them to have contact with the victim so they have a greater appreciation of maybe the crime they committed and what the effect is on the community. So going through the actual budget lines, it's pretty much the same as it has been in the past, other than adding one additional officer to the salaries. I think that's about it. I think one of the big things we had to add was fuel. For 2019, we had only budgeted $28,000 for 2018, and it increased it up to $40,000 based on the price of gasoline.
Another thing while you're looking at the health insurance has really changed. It's not just because of the one officer. They've had a lot of people get married in that department, so that's one of the changes in the health insurance from single to family.
One of the things we're dealing with right now is we have one of our officers is actively deployed overseas. He's in the Army Reserve, and we don't expect to get him back until March or April at the soonest. And then he's going to have probably benefit time to burn off. And then we just had 2 officers that just had new babies, so there'll be some family leave time taken up for a better portion of the rest of this year. So it's been kind of thin as far as staffing goes on the police department. Unless anyone has questions, that's all I have.
Questions? Alder Moore?
I have a request and a question. My request is if you guys could speak up a little bit when you're at the table, because we have a play going on out here, and it's at this end of the table, it's really hard to hear with competing. My question is, in the 2013 study, they were anticipating a 5% annual increase in calls for service. And it looks from the chart that, in fact, they've dropped and they've been relatively steady since 2000. There has not been a 5% increase. Do you have any idea where we're at, kind of year to date, for this year, for 2018, with calls for service?
Sarah, do you have
Do you get a sense of whether it's about the same?
It's probably about
Okay.
full. I haven't seen part of, I can't say positively, what we're at, of course, because I don't have the numbers in front of me. It's been a little more difficult with our new CAD system, with call entry, so I know there are some that go uncaptured, but I would guess it's probably pretty close to,
About the same.
yeah.
Anyone else? Doug,
I do.
when you're done chewing?
So right now we have 2 patrol sergeants, is that right?
Yes.
And we operate 3 shifts a day. So does that one of the shifts doesn't have a patrol sergeant then?
No, the 2 patrol sergeants work a schedule of, they work a 12-hour shift. So we don't have 24-hour supervisor coverage. We'd never have. Even if we had 3 patrol sergeants and they worked 8-hour shifts, you're still going to have days when they're on their days off where you're not going to have
Right.
someone working. So we try to cover as much as we can. One sergeant comes, what are the hours, Kurt? One comes in at 3 to 3, and Knockreiner works 4 to 3. He works 1 hour less because he currently has the K-9. Once his K-9 retires, he'll go to a full 12-hour shift. But now for FLSA purposes and taking care of the dog, he gets 1 less hour in his shift. So it carries him out to like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning past the busy time.
Okay. Is there anything about the makeup of the calls that we get that's significantly different from these other communities that would drive our total number higher?
We've traditionally had more theft than the other communities.
Retail theft? Or
Theft in general.
Okay.
But retail theft is part of that.
Yep.
We're probably in the 600 plus range every year as far as that goes.
Looks like we have a lot more property crime than most
Right.
communities too, and what is that as opposed to theft?
That's part of it.
So these other communities they have, about 40% or so fewer calls for service per officer than we do. So how are we doing that? Are there things that aren't getting done or have to do faster or more superficially or?
Well, in the staffing study that Dr. Frisch did, he talked about how we respond to different calls. You know, there's basically 3 different types of calls. There's the high priority calls, there's the calls where maybe a crime has been committed but someone's being cooperative, and then there's real low priority calls that maybe someone has a barking dog or someone wants more radar enforcement, or someone's complaining about drug activity in their neighborhood. Those second and third, we're pretty good at responding to the high priority calls because we can drop everything and go and usually call mutual aid to help us if we need it. If it's a lower priority call, we're not going to call mutual aid for someone to run radar on Winnequa Road or check someone's house to watch it for a couple hours for drug activity, because no one is going to do that for us. And a lot of times we just don't have the time to devote people to it. So it's, as he talked about, and I mentioned in the PowerPoint, is those are the type of calls that kind of fall to the bottom of the list when you're trying to deal with complaints, the quality of life stuff for people.
So those calls though are on the total CFS?
Everything, a calls per service, it's all kind of like everything we do.
Okay.
I'm going to a meeting for the community relations officer, that would be a call for service. We're here tonight at a meeting, that would be a call for service. Someone has kids going through their cars, and they call up and say there's kids running around with flashlights going through cars. Send an officer, that would be a call for service.
So the three of you being here is counted as 3 calls for service?
No, it'd just be one call.
One?
Yeah,
Anyone else? Chad?
so it'll be 0.3, right?
Okay.
So,
Chad.
I'm curious about the one chart you had up there, and I couldn't find it in the report, but you were showing, and I think it's because it's more recent data, but you were showing how many officers we have per our population, and you noted that that's higher, but then, of course, you guys are working a lot harder.
Right.
And I'm curious to know your opinion, and I know we've talked about this before, but obviously there's a discrepancy. You guys are working really hard, and we have a lot to be proud of as a community for the service that you and your department are providing to us. And on the one hand, it seems like we've got more officers than the typical taxpayer in other communities. And yet, you're getting all these additional calls, and some of that's been addressed. I'm wondering how much, a lot of times when we talk about the fire department, we talk about how mutual aid is a part of the solution. How does that play into, it seems like inevitably that must be what's going on right now, because otherwise, you guys are already dealing with twice the calls. Is it a function of us being on the border with Madison, and so the call comes in, but a lot of times it's on either Broadway or the Beltline or Monona Drive? I'm trying to understand how we do better by your department relative to the other police departments in the community, because I think that's part of the solution. And then it's finding out what's the right force size for us as a community.
Sure, nationally, they try to compare police departments to the population that they serve. But in our case, we don't fall into that model because our population is much greater than whatever it is right now. Joan probably knows it off the top of her head, 7,800 and something. But you have to also factor in the Beltline and the tens of thousands of cars that go by there every day that we have to handle crashes on, and attracting all the people to the businesses. They're not our residents. Many of them don't live here, but they come here to work, they come here to shop. Those are the people we have to provide a service to. And we don't have the highest, it's on page 9 of the slides I showed, calls for service, and it has sworn. The FBI likes to compare sworn per 1,000, and we were in the 2.4, 2.5 range, which is somewhat higher than the national average, but yet it's not particularly the highest in the state of Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
You look at places like Lake Delton and the Wisconsin Dells. They have their residential population is probably lower than Monona's, but the visitors that come there, they could have 100,000 people on a day, and they have to be able to respond to that. And there are other agencies. I could have listed more in the state of Wisconsin, but I didn't. I didn't want to bore you with too many numbers. But our need is for officers to respond to calls, not necessarily have officers based on the population of the residential community, because realistically we have much fewer calls in the residential neighborhoods than we do in the business areas.
Okay.
So you were talking about mutual aid before too. I know I was putting together some slides, and one of the slides was a day where it was a Saturday. They had a crash and this happens all the time. They had a crash at the Beltline in Southtown. They had 2.5 lanes closed, and we only had 2 officers working. So we had Madison there helping us with that, with Dane County. And then they had another call at like one of the restaurants where someone was threatening somebody with a weapon. So now you have to call for mutual aid, and you have Madison coming with 6, 8, 10 officers to handle that. So, you know, we had 2 calls. We only had 2 officers, but we probably had 20 officers tied up. We count on the other agencies quite a bit for mutual aid. And there was an example several years ago at the East Side Club. We called for mutual aid. A Madison officer got injured, and that's the liability of when you call for mutual aid. You are taking on the liability of that officer's safety. He got hurt, and we paid out $13,000 for his injuries because he was there to help us.
Okay.
Can you tell me, are these calls for service, are these all, do you just count the calls you respond to, or these are all the calls you got and maybe you didn't respond to all of them?
No, these would be everything. If we got a call, you know, at some point we would go. We don't ever get a call and not respond. I mean, we've had cases where officers are tied up. We'll get someone saying, we just had one last week, retail theft, person's cooperative, we need someone to come by and issue this person a ticket. Well, we don't have anybody. Can you do a self-report on the internet right now? And then when we're free, we'll come down and get the report, and then we'll just mail the person a ticket if they're cooperative. If they're not cooperative, you know, it kicks it up a little bit
Right.
more and makes it more priority. But if you're already dealing with a priority, then you know, we're not going to call mutual aid for someone to handle.
Oh, I get that.
routine-
I'm just wondering if this counts all the calls
Right.
or all the calls that you actually respond to.
Yeah, it'd be every traffic stop. It would be
So every call with a noisy neighbor,
That would be a call
you
for
respond to
service.
all
Yep.
of them?
Everything we do.
Okay. Nancy?
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to get my head, I think, around the same thing that several other people are and that Chad certainly referenced. I mean, I certainly understand that it's not as simple as number of officers per capita of residents. I mean, I get it that we're on the belt line in a busy area, but it still seems really, extraordinarily higher than everybody else. I mean, and it's not like, for instance, as another example, it's not like DeForest doesn't have a highway going through it, major highway going through it, which I'm assuming if there was a crash on 94, they'd have to respond to, or.
That'd be state patrol would handle that.
Okay. I don't know, it just, it does, it's a real eye-opener. And so, you're absolutely sure that the CFS numbers from other communities, I mean, we just learned that this is not just the calls you get, but also the meetings you attend and everything else that you do.
Well, I mean,
So,
sorry.
yeah, so if that's the case, are we sure that everybody's counting the same way? Do they count all of those in their figure? I mean, is there a standard for how you count a CFS across, that would cut across all?
Yeah, and I was halfway kind of jokingly saying, yes, we count this as a call for. Many times we go to meetings. For us
Right.
three, we don't count that. But for example, on Wednesday, they're going to have the Halloween parade at Winnequa School,
Right.
and some officers are going to be there. So that's going to be counted as one call for service, no matter how many people show up there. We'll
Right.
probably have 3 or 4 people there. It's only one call for service.
Right. And I'm not saying you shouldn't count it, because the reality is if you're sitting in a meeting with us, you can't be out on the street doing what you need to be doing, patrolling or taking care of other issues that might be happening. So I'm not suggesting you shouldn't. I'm just wondering if there is that standard that exists across the communities, because it is rather striking. Excuse me.
Well, we're pretty confident in the number of calls for service for our IT group, which is Fitchburg, Middleton, Monona, Sun Prairie, and Verona. We're pretty confident because, we get that information basically from one person, the crime analyst that's employed by the group, provides all that.
If you look on page 11, you can see the 2016 crash rate. Again, it's just kind of location.
Sure.
We had 331 crashes, McFarland had 97,
Right,
and DeForest had 107.
right,
And so we just happen to have 3 times that just because of the highways that are here.
right. Yeah.
And we talked about this before. I mean, if we were out in Oregon or away from Madison, we'd probably be overstaffed. But we're not. We're totally surrounded by Madison. So we get the same type of crime, same volume, probably more of a traffic volume than even some parts of Madison, because we're coming right off the interstate on the Beltline, and we're like the first community as you go west on the Beltline.
Andrew?
I was just gonna ask, what is the cost of the new employee? What is the, I don't see it anywhere in there.
Is it 80-something?
Yeah, it's in the K2. It's 82,000. It includes health insurance, Wisconsin retirement, like that. We budgeted a family insurance.
So you said 80, Mark?
It's actually 92.
It's 93?
92.
92, okay. Anyone else? Okay. Do you want to go on to
Sure. Dispatch
dispatch?
for emergency
which is
communications.
on page 74.
Ready?
Oh, yep.
Okay, so again, our goals, basically continue to keep costs down while increasing efficiency through different advances, focusing on the demands of the community. Just some of the things I put in here, I try to keep some of the significant program information in there. Just as you get new alders, you can kind of have a little historical background. So back in 2007, we added a 5th full-time employee. It was very positive impact. However, in 2009, one of our dispatchers resigned, and then due to a budget shortfall, the city put on a hiring freeze. And at the same time, when we're trying to get a full-time employee, we felt that we would be better served to jump on the MPSIS group as far as IT support and services. So at that time, we joined the Fitchburg, Middleton, Verona, Monona, Sun Prairie group. And it's been great for us. I mean, they have been able to do things that we were never able to get before. But it's come in 2018, we were able to get another 5th full-time dispatch position added to the operations. I think it was supposed to go in July 1st. It was supposed to be July 1st, and our new dispatcher just was released from training within the last couple of days. Yeah. So it just takes a while to find the right person and then fill the shift and get them trained up. In late 2015, during the 2016 budget, it was recommended we do a study, determine if we should maintain an independent dispatch center. The MPSIS group had previously done one in 2012, so the study felt that it was most cost-effective to maintain an independent service to each community. And then we had a dispatch study group back in September of 2016, which consisted of city alders, multiple city staff, and community members. During that group, it was recommended the fire department dispatching to Dane County because Dane County was dispatching everyone else in the county except for the Monona Fire Department. So they made the switch last January. And then other services such as dispatch records be retained in our communications center. Then just this last July, the dispatch study group again reconvened to discuss the status of dispatch, and basically we're talking about our 911 system, and that's something I talked about in the capital budget. because we found that we were getting, on average, probably less than two hardline. We only took hardline 911 calls. We never took the cellular calls. We're getting less than two or less a day. So the plan is to have the county probably sometime in early 2019 start taking over all of our 911 calls, because we're on the county CAD system, so it's easier for them to get the information as a call taker, push the button so it comes to Monona, and then our dispatches would dispatch the call to our officers. So some goal achievements in 2018. We have the pretty pictures here showing the new dispatch furniture that was installed. As far as training, dispatchers Elliott and Nelson attended the 2018 WIPSCOM conference, which is a training for dispatchers. And during May of 2018, when we were doing our EVOC training, emergency vehicle training, we were able to get all the full-time dispatchers a training day. Just last night, we had 3 of our full-time dispatchers sit in over at Dane County Dispatch. Was it for 4 hours?
That was 7 hours.
7 hours, okay. And Lieutenant Duman worked from what time to what time?
7P to 4A.
7P to 4A to allow those dispatchers to attend that training over there. So that's one of the things we try to do. Is training is always a difficult thing to do. Hopefully with our 5th dispatcher we'll be able to send more people away for more training. The only thing that changed from my proposal, I think, was the mayor cut out our fitness incentive. No one ever did it. It was nice. It was a nice thought, but probably if people weren't going to take advantage of it, probably didn't need it. With 5 full-time dispatchers, I noticed today that we only had $1,200 in there for dispatch uniforms. So possible maybe we could have someone make an amendment at some point to add another $200 in there. Not sure about that. The big jump in expenses was under service contracts, where we went from, in 2018, our participation with the MPSIS group was $54,295. In 2019, it's jumped up by $7,800 to $62,159. And that's mostly because we added that second license plate recognition unit, and there's annual fees as far as maintaining it that boosted that up. There is a potential savings in here that's still in here, and I don't know how you want to manipulate that, but there's $2,800 for AT&T phone circuits for Public Works and Fire Department VHF radios, 4 at the Water Tower, 2 at Southtown. Once we get the capital going in 2019, where those are replaced by those microwave antennas, potentially some of that money will not have to be spent in 2019.
And the reason why we left it in there, because the timing, we didn't know for sure when that timing would be up. So we left it in there for the 1 year, and we for sure take it out next year. That was the rationale at the time.
Questions? Chad?
So I want to apologize in advance by this question seeming a little startling, perhaps. I mean, I know you have to have communications, but I also know that part of communications was the 911 service that
Right.
we have been providing that we're moving away from. And the thing that I'm struck by when I look at this budget, because we were just talking about, wouldn't it be nice if we had those other 5 officers? The cost that we spend on emergency communications is roughly equal to the salary of 5 new officers. And so I know we have to have communications, and maybe we have to have everything that's here to manage not just your department, but all of our emergency services for public safety. Because this does serve the fire department and EMS as well, correct?
Well, it serves the whole city. We do not dispatch fire or EMS. That has been turned over to Dane County. Basically, EMS has always been dispatched by Dane County.
Right.
Because the medical director wants a certain protocol done. This last year, the fire dispatch portion was turned over to Dane County. So now they're on the same group, because a lot of times they're dealing with whatever their Mavis box alarms, and they're calling mutual aid things. And rather than have them go through a Monona dispatcher and have the Monona dispatcher get on the phone and call Dane County and say this and that. This way they just go directly to the Dane County dispatcher and they coordinate it all, they talk to each other. And it just makes it cleaner. You have to keep in mind that our dispatchers are also our records personnel. They are also man the city hall window 24 hours a day. There was a lot of, there could be some benefits, but a lot of things would have to change as far as our operations if we took them out of that building. And potentially down the road that will change if another public safety building is built and we're not at City Hall. You're gonna start thinking about how you're gonna lock the front door, how you're gonna secure all the valuable, there's a lot of valuable artifacts in the City Hall that if someone's around, they can at least see if someone's carrying something out the door as opposed to, coming in later. So you'd probably have to set up some sort of emergency phone system if there's nobody at the window to greet someone.
Right. Well, and so that all makes sense to me, and so I guess I just want to ask the question, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but like, is it conceivable that part of the solution to having more officers on the beat might be in this communications budget? Or am I hearing, and I think what I heard you say is if that were to happen, we'd have a different reality when we go down to City Hall will start getting locked.
Well, that, and right now, we're very busy, as you can see from our calls for service. If we had to go on and be dispatched by the county, we would not be able to, I think it's gonna come down to a lot of officer safety issues because the officers aren't gonna be able to get on the radio and do some of the self-initiated things like traffic grants that they do now. Because there's a limited number of people, they're dealing with the entire county or the whole city of Madison. And the other part is, where we're located, our radio system that we use is part of the Madison radio system. We have our own channel on the Madison system. So to bring in Danecom, even though it would work, it's not gonna work as well as the 800 system that we have now. And I know I'm throwing numbers around and
That's okay.
some alders might not, understand it, but there are two different systems, and the system we use in Monona works much better than the alternative would.
Okay. Do other municipalities, places like DeForest, or I imagine Middleton has a communications center, but are there smaller communities similar to us who don't really have this sort of communications budget?
Well, there are, they call them PSAPs, whatever the P stands for, Public Safety, something. So Stoughton, these are the ones that have their own communications centers. Stoughton, Fitchburg, Middleton, Sun Prairie, Monona, Capitol Police, UW Police, State Patrol. That might be it. So there's 8 of them. And then everybody else, including the city of Madison, is dispatched by Dane County. But there is the Dane County Dispatch Center is probably twice as big as this room. And they probably have, 14 plus dispatch councils. And minimum, and they also dispatch all the fire too. So minimum, they might have like 15 or 20 people in that room on a shift, spinning all the dials. So, who would talk to us is a question. Because if we're on the Madison system, Madison sure doesn't want us talking on their channel because they're busy enough. And so they're not going to add another dispatcher just for Monona. So they'd have to piggyback us on somewhere. We've had these discussions with the county before.
I think a lot of it was in the dispatch study that we brought to the council 2 years ago.
Right.
Could you address the difference, and because I was amazed at this, I was on that study committee, at the number of calls we get that come in on the non-emergency line as opposed to 911. It's the disparity is huge, and my understanding, at least when I was on the committee, was a lot of those calls that are considered non-emergency would go to a voicemail box at Dane County. They wouldn't be And they may or may not be responded to within 24 hours or maybe never. But the numbers, the difference in the numbers is huge. And I don't know if you have that off the top of your head, but.
Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I can talk about it. I don't have exact numbers. What I can say is the 911 calls we received, I want to say last year, was probably right around 1,500 or less. And with 16,500 calls for service, about 15,000 of those calls for service were either officer initiated or came in on our business lines. So in comparison, I would estimate at least 80% are business line calls, 20%, maybe probably less than that, were 911 calls. And a good majority of the 911 calls that we receive are ambulance calls that we transfer to Dane County. So, the 911 system itself isn't the communication center. We receive a lot of calls and even with those calls for service, there's probably a good majority of calls of people calling in and, what is your ordinance about this? Or, when does the parade start? A lot of questions that we get that our dispatchers handle those calls never get entered into the CAD. Is that a call for service? Are we providing a service to somebody when we do that? Yes. And that's not reflected here because it's not something that the officers would respond to. But it is something that we provide the citizens a service to be able to answer those questions. And as far as the Dane County number, it is a telephone tree when you call up there, so you have to kind of go through if it's happening now, say happening now, or press this. If it's, something that happened in the past, do this. I don't know what calls are, I know if you say if it's happening now, you do get connected to somebody, but their priority is the 911 calls, of course. They have, call takers for both 911 and business line calls. So I can't say for sure what calls would be voicemail, but I do know to make that switch, they want nothing to do with our non-emergency phone that gets those one of the parade calls. And I have a question about my ticket calls. We would not be able to route those calls to them.
So if someone calls in, and I realize we're probably all going to be speculating a little bit about this, but it's like to the city of Oregon or something like that, where they don't have the, communications department that we have 24/7. They're probably getting voicemail when they call the non-emergency number, and then someone on city staff is having to follow up, or possibly maybe they're calling a public safety non-emergency number, and someone will follow up. And I guess what strikes me about this conversation, and again, I realize the Public Safety Committee ultimately has to do the big decision with your guidance, but it kind of seems like we have this Cadillac communication service in some respects, and yet we're stressing out our officers because, this is, and again, I'm not saying that in a critical way, I'm just saying as things have evolved and we're all trying to figure out how to take a limited pie and to spend that money in the best place. What strikes me as I'm sitting here tonight, and I've been doing this for 10 years, and it's just never occurred to me before, but maybe part of the solution is, I say to myself, would I rather have to be inconvenienced for a phone call, or would I rather not have an officer that can respond when there's an emergency? I don't think any of us would answer that question differently. But it seems like our budget right now is such that, and this is just a relic of how this all unfolds year after year, maybe we're a little heavy in our communications spending, and that money could be in the...
I think it's kind of hard to say what those calls are. You can't just generalize and say all those non-emergency calls are calls that could go to voicemail and someone else could answer at some other time, and someone
Right.
else would
Well,
have to answer them at some
Right, and I
point.
don't know the answer to that, but
Yeah.
I'm struck, I mean, based on the fact that there are only 8 of these emergency communications kind of centers in Dane County, would that be?
Doug?
Yeah, so the dispatch study committee did, we looked at a range of issues, and we looked at, you know, the small number of 911 calls that we got. And that was my initial reaction too, as well. My initially, thought, well, if we get rid of 911 calls, can we reduce this? Will we need to reduce staff in communications? But they have other duties, as the chief referenced earlier, besides that. So that really, unless you wanted to go down to where we didn't have 24/7 service, so that there wasn't somebody there to answer the phone, you really, even then, you would maybe save, 1 or 2 dispatchers. And I would just note, we actually added a dispatcher, in this year's budget based on the need for it. And the 911 calls going away is just not, it's pretty insignificant in terms of their total operation.
My point is that we look at these things in a silo. When we're talking about dispatch, we're thinking, well, what does dispatch need? And then we talk about the police department, we say, well, what does the police department need? But, I mean, is it not true that on some level, that dispatch center, that I know you spend a lot of time in there, some of the paperwork and some of the things that the police department does are handled by dispatch, correct? So in some respects, the numbers
All
might.
of it? All of it, yeah.
So are these numbers a little distorted? I mean, dispatch, is the staff in dispatch part of the staff in these statistics for officers, or is it just a matter of talking about officers on the beat for the, CFS per police officer?
The dispatchers are not assigned any calls for service, so when like I said, how we might get a call, just public questioning fireworks, the parade, those kinds of things, we don't enter calls for those. Those are not reflected here. The dispatchers are not assigned to those. What they are doing behind the scenes is taking those calls. They're dealing with walk-up window traffic. They are entering the reports, the records that we need, preparing the court paperwork, and they're doing that in addition to filling that dispatch role. So when you talk about maybe we can reduce the services here, we still need those records people. We can't reduce those. We still need the service contracts and the record system, a good bulk of this. We can't reduce that. Reducing the dispatch center, as you are suggesting, could help the officer side. It's not going to, in my opinion, reduce it enough because we still need the staff to
Okay.
perform a duty, services with records and court paperwork and those other things that if they weren't there, then we would need more of me or somebody else to do that work.
That completely makes sense to me. I guess another way of what I'm asking is it possible that these statistics look, overwhelming for you guys and your department, for the police department? And is it true that emergency communications helps to lighten that load?
I think absolutely it does. Having our own dispatch center absolutely does.
Okay.
Because what they do is they kind of run interference to judge when a person gets dispatched to a call. If we were with the county, it's like call comes in, boom, call comes in, boom. And the other thing, if we were in the county, our officers would be pulled out for mutual aid a lot more than we do now. Because right now we're sort of under the radar because we're on a different channel under
Right.
the Madison system. If we're on the Danecom system, all on the one county channel, they'd be going out of town more than they'd be getting calls in town.
Okay.
And then the other thing is, and it was one of the chiefs that we brought in to talk to the dispatch study group, when he's the chief in Verona, when he was in like the Milwaukee County area, they lost their dispatch center. It was one of the worst things that ever happened, and you can never go back once you get rid of it. You're not gonna say, oh, let's don't try this as an experiment, let's, put $500,000 in and create a dispatch center. You're never gonna do it again. You're gonna lose control over the people that push the buttons that tell your officers where to go.
Nancy and then Molly?
So as a newbie, I haven't been here 10 years. But I just want to try to get, I'm trying to get my head around. It sounds like what you're saying is that through all the studies that we've done over the years, we made the determination that it would be, well, initially we thought it was going to save us money to hook into the Dane County 911. Yes? But in reality, it's really not saving us money because we still have not only the dispatch function that we need, but we also have the dispatch is really, it's not just communications, it's really communications and administration. They have a big administrative function, not just a communications function. And not only that, the communications function is not public safety communications functions, it's the catch-all information line, it sounds like, after hours for the city, if people are calling and asking about, what time the parade starts, which is obviously not that you shouldn't answer it, but that's a general information, that's not a public safety issue, if you will, and are calling about. So it sounds like switching 911 to Dane is more effective and potentially more efficient, but it's not really saving us money.
It did save us money, though, because how much
Yeah.
would that software cost for a new system that we had to replace?
Well, our 911
$150,000
system
or-
basically is worn out. We were looking at probably $150,000 to $200,000 to replace that system.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and which we would have been doing this year in the capital budget.
But
Right.
But we didn't have
but
to.
we're paying to be part of that 911 system, are we not?
For Dane County to answer our 911
Yeah.
calls, they don't charge us anything.
They don't, okay.
But for us to continue to get the one or two hardline only 911 calls, it would have cost us $150,000 to $200,000 for a new box in the IT room.
Okay, so it saved us money in terms of software, but it didn't save us any money in terms of personnel. We still need the
Correct.
dispatch,
Well,
it's-
we still need the,
And
right.
it is probably saving us some time because
Yeah.
those hardline 911 calls are usually from the senior centers. So, and they're usually ambulance calls. So it's actually speeding up the process because instead of having them call the Monona Dispatch Center, get the information, hold on, let me transfer you to a Dane County Emergency Medical Dispatch Center.
Right.
And where they go through the 20 questions again, it's speeding up the process of getting the ambulance out.
Okay. Thank you.
Alder Groupie?
So just a quick point of clarification, you mentioned that there's 24-hour window coverage in City Hall, and the non-emergency line is also operating 24 hours per day.
Mhm.
Correct.
Do other municipalities our size also operate on a 24-hour communication basis, or is that something special that is specific to Monona?
Any of the named PSAPs or dispatch centers are 24 hours, and there was the 8 that he just named. One similar in size to us would be probably Stoughton is the closest, and they are a 24-hour center.
When you get a 911, when a 911 call comes into Dane County, then it comes to us eventually to dispatch the police officer, isn't that correct? So it's not that they're just dealing with non-emergency calls.
Right.
A lot of 911 calls come in, go to the county, are already because of everybody using cell phones. So they're doing a lot more in terms of calls than just non-emergency calls
I've used
too.
both lines, so thanks.
Anyone? Andrew?
Not as hard-hitting as Alder Spates, but the uniform allowance, can you share a little bit about what type of uniform you need? What is the history behind that?
The policy allows them to wear like either a polo, solid colored polo with the embroidery that says TCM Communications, or it's like a business casual. So the uniform allowance doesn't pay for everything that would be considered the business casual. I think the pants have to be black colored. The shoe, the footwear has to be black colored. It has to be closed toe. It will cover those, like I said, the polos, or if they have a pullover or something like that that they want to wear. It's kind of something that has to be approved by the chief for that.
But they don't have
be used.
anything specific they need, like police officers do. Right.
It's not, no, it's
Okay.
not a strict requirement.
And then my other question is Danecom. I know, how is that going? Is it up and running? I know it had a lot of hiccups for a long while.
Yeah, it seems to be running. I mean, it's different. Of course, the Madison channel is different now too, because everything is digitalized. So unless you're talking like right into the microphone when you're talking on the radio, if you're talking off on the side like that, it comes across all garbled. It sounds like you're talking in a can all the time. It like changes people's voices. You don't recognize them.
Yeah.
Things. It's like robots talking.
So they haven't worked out
But
the
that's
kinks.
just how it is.
Yeah.
But it is good. Now, pretty much anybody in Dane County can talk to anybody on any radio system. So
Okay.
you can talk from the county to Madison. Madison can talk to county people can talk to Monona people. It's working pretty good.
So to a great extent, it's just for large emergencies or those mutual aid situations where you need to be communicating across lines?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, if you're driving through Oregon or something like that, and you see something, you can get on the channel and talk to an Oregon police officer.
Okay.
If someone's coming through Monona, they get on our channel and talk to us. What's nice though is they've created emergency channels that cross both radio systems. So they have one. It's called I don't know what the L stands for, but it's a LTAC 11, 12, 13. So we had one where we had our bank robber that was going south on the interstate, and they put everybody on LTAC 13. So whether you're on a portable 800 radio or portable VHF radio or a mobile radio, you could all be on the same channel. It's like seamlessly talking. So
Gotcha.
we had to wait a long time, went
Yeah.
through a lot of pain and suffering,
Yeah.
but it seems to be working pretty good.
Now, we're still paying into that, right?
We are paying, yes.
How much is that per year?
That was, actually it's in
Sorry, is
the
it?
operations. No,
Did
it's
I
on
miss
that
it?
last page. That's 2018. Who can find it first?
Sorry, I thought I looked.
Oh, that's
and I
okay.
couldn't find it.
Danecom,
5,500 estimated Danecom fees.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
estimated, yeah, 5,500.
Gotcha. Cool, thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We will go on to sustainability. Brad, you're up. This is on page 31.
You have 1 minute.
Pardon? 31
Every year they get 15 minutes.
for sustainability. Well, that's where it's
Yeah.
detailed in the,
31.
Well, they were generous. Well, you got a half hour.
Yeah.
So for sustainability, there's only one item that Brad's going to talk about, his one line item. We'll let him talk. There's been some changes from today that we'll talk about, so. Brad.
Okay, so the only line item changed on the budget from today is that I found out that the Green Tier Legacy Energy Task Force annual fee is no longer applicable, so we do not need to pay that fee in.
oh,
My only suggestion or ask of the council and the mayor is that we just allocate that to the sustainability intern line item.
So what page are we on, by the way?
31.
Okay, sorry.
If we did that, if we kept it at $12.50 per hour, 18 hours a week, we'd essentially gain about 2.7 weeks of work from the
because
intern.
we increased our hours
Yeah,
per week.
yep. So just for a little history, 2015-16, the hours budgeted were 12 hours a week. 2017, we upped that to 15 hours a week. Based on workload and the amount of projects that are requested and that we're working on and things that are coming down the pipeline, I suggested that we raise that to 18 hours a week.
And that's 37 weeks out of the year. That's
Yep.
not 52.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to know a recap of 2018, all the projects that we're working on, I can give that as well. So you have a little.
I think
base
I'm gonna
knowledge.
have you give a sustainability report later.
I can do that.
Sometime in
Planned
December or
on-
whatever.
Yep, I planned on reporting to council in the second week of November. If that's not too if that's too busy, then I to
December might be
December.
better because the second one in November will be when we're voting on this
Right.
budget.
okay,
So,
no problem.
okay. Anyone have any questions? Chad?
So the amendment would be in order for that switcheroo, I take it? For the
Yeah.
green tier?
Yes.
Or you just leave it in for the, he doesn't need it, as long as the dollar amount doesn't change. I guess the description changes. Yeah.
Anyone else? Thank you, Brad.
No problem.
At least you know a lot more about the police department. Okay, fire and EMS, this is pages 64 and 142.
For Scott Starks too, this is a little bit of a challenging one because at the time, it's still not settled yet, is the union contract, so it's been a tricky one doing this.
Fire department, okay. Basically, like Mark said, because of the, union contract negotiations haven't been done yet, pretty much all of the personnel is kind of up in the air as of yet.
Although we did estimate for the 2.25%
Yes, that's all.
pay
Yeah.
increase, so,
That part's in there.
yeah.
So,
Which would be the bulk of any monetary changes, most likely.
So, moving forward, the changes that we have, uniform allowance went up $400. Just cost of uniforms as it moves forward, sweatshirts, t-shirts, hats, that type of stuff. Length of service award went up $1,000. That's the retirement program for the volunteers. That's, has a state match associated with that, so, and with the cost for managing that program, which is done by, I think it's UBC, UBC, one of the two, have gone up over the years, so we haven't, this is the first increase we've done since I've gotten here. Telephone went up $500. Now, when we talk about telephone, it also, that takes into consideration the mobile hotspots that we have in the ambulance and the engine, and we'll be moving one into the command car also for our MDCs, our computers that we have in the vehicles, so that we can get all the information on the particular calls. All of the police squad cars have those in there. This allows us to see pre-plans, where the Knox boxes are located, any call information, if there happens to be, alerts on that particular property, if there's issues with that particular property. So it's not just the cell phones or the telephone that you typically think about, or that we used to think about. It probably should be listed as cellular as opposed to telephone. Move down, fire prevention and education. There again, an increase of $500 that goes back to all of our goodies that we provide at the open house. It also takes care of our fire codes each year, the new national fire codes that we have to utilize for our fire inspections. So those are. And the biggest one is the intern program. We're looking at reinstating the intern program. When we talked about it, you zeroed that one out on yours?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Huh. I just printed this off the website today, and,
She might let us shoot for
yeah, that's the wrong one. See, it's still on this one.
That's, oh, it's this one here.
Oh, okay. So, oh, we don't have to talk about the intern program now. No, I lost my spot.
So paid on premise would be the next increase.
The paid on premise was an increase of 2,000. Based on, past history, so.
And this is a second year of this program, and I think I've noticed, I mean, I think year end we had 19,000. You know, we budgeted 17, but it's a program I think people are starting to utilize a little bit more. I'm noticing in the past history, but, so it's the second year will be now it's the third year of the program.
Scott, can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I think the first year that we had it, we maybe budgeted 30,000, and you
That was
didn't
paid on
hit that
call.
number.
So there,
Oh, that was
there's-
paid on
yep,
call, not paid on
There's two different
premise?
ones on, so there's the paid on call, paid on premise.
Yeah.
The paid on call is when, our
Yeah.
volunteer firefighters come in and they get paid $15 per call.
That's the recruitment and retention
Yeah.
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 line item, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And,
I mean, either way, can you talk about how paid on premise is increasing in popularity is the wrong
So-
word, but
Yep, so the
There's
paid
more
on
of it.
premise program is when we have, our volunteers, they come in and either, stay at the station. Anybody who was hired after, January 1st of, 2017 is required to put 24 hours at the fire station per month. They get a stipend for doing that. If they're a firefighter, they get $52 for that 24 hours. If they're an officer or a driver, they get $90 for that 24 hours. We also have, and for those that were on the department before January 1st of 17, there was no requirement for them to put any hours in at the station. We decided that the requirement that they had prior to that was that they make a minimum of 10% of the calls. Well, we decided that it was more advantageous to have personnel at the station, or having an idea of when we have personnel responding or capable of responding to calls. So right now, we don't know how many of the volunteers are going to come. That's basically why we end up having 32 volunteers, because you figure you get, hopefully 25 to 50% come into the calls, depending on what the call is. If it's an EMS assist, we may not get somebody to pull away from their child's birthday party. If it's a structure fire, pretty much everybody's coming. This way, we require them, so those that were hired prior to 2017, now they have the option to do either the paid on premise or what we call duty crew, where they'll sign up for a duty crew and they're required to do 12 hours a month of duty crew from their house. They sign up and they're then stating they're going to go to every call during that 12-hour period. If they work over 32 hours for the duty crew from their home, they then get paid the paid on premise. The 12 hours prior to that, if they only do 12 hours, the minimum, they don't get any pay for that. We gave them kind of the incentive. If you do, we're looking at it as 3 8-hour shifts a month from your house, you're going to get a stipend of, if you were to be similar at the station for the 24 hours. So, do I have everybody confused on that one, or?
So for the volunteers hired after 2017, it's
Yep.
24 hours in a month, or they have to do one 24-hour shift
24 hours in a month.
total?
It can either be 3 8-hour shifts, 2 12-hour shifts, or 1 24-hour shift.
Anything else?
This is probably clear, but if they are doing paid on premise and they go to a call, they don't get paid for the
Nope.
call.
They do get paid for the call.
So they're kind of double dipping from both funds.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
But they get the paid on premise because they're not responding from their house. They're physically at the fire station.
Okay.
So it's a stipend to be at the fire station.
So similarly, if somebody signed up for that 12-hour shift at their house, then they go to a call and they work 32 hours, they get paid for the call and still get the stipend for
Correct.
paid on premise?
Yep.
Even though they're at home?
Yep.
Okay.
Because they're stating they are staying within the city limits for that 12-hour period.
Okay.
Or 32-hour period it would be, so that we know that they're responding at that.
Okay.
They guarantee that they will be going to any calls during that time period that they're on duty crew.
Anyone else? Okay, ambulance, EMS, page 142.
Okay, similarly.
Before he starts, because he doesn't really do the revenue side, we did increase it $5,000 from what the original budget was, just based on, 2017 and 2000 estimate is roughly around 390, so we did increase it by $5,000.
Okay, so that would be the revenue portion of it. Back to the personnel, similar to, because we split our personnel, half on the EMS or the ambulance budget, half on the fire budget. Same thing. EMS stipends did go up 1,500. That's based on how much we have, the personnel that we have coming in. So we have volunteers that come in and ride EMS shifts. Those personnel, then they do get a stipend. They get a $35 stipend for 12 hours, depending on their licensure level. But $35, $40, or $30, $35, and $45, depending on their licensure level. We've seen more personnel doing the EMS, so that's the reason why. And then we typically have 3 people on the ambulance. There's less of a chance that we'll get paged out for an EMS assist with page out the whole fire department to do the EMS assist. They have 3 on the ambulance. If they have an incident where they need 2 medics in the back, they've got a 3rd person to drive the ambulance there. So going down the telephone, once again, more of the cellular, it's increased by 300. The service contracts went up by $3,000. That's paying our EMS billing contractor, and that's based on the percentage that we're required to pay them, and based on the increase of our revenues. And then $800 in the fuels and additives. So there should have been, on the fire side, there should have been an increase in fuels and additives also. There was. I neglected to mention that, but that's based on the gallons per, or price per gallon for our diesel and unleaded.
I was just gonna say for the fuel, we have 2 people, Quick Trip we use, and we do use Landmarks. We do get detailed reports by each car and each vehicle that's used, so we know how much we're paying per gallon, and we track that throughout the year. These numbers are pretty close numbers.
Dan Stefani gives us there's a government entity that puts out a prediction on what fuel costs are going to be for the next year, and that's what we typically use. Fire, police, and DPW utilize the same number for fuel, for gasoline and diesel. So.
Questions, anyone? Doug?
When was the last time we increased the ambulance fee?
Off the top of my head, I want to say it was 2 years ago.
Mhm. They do increase, that's the base rate, but they do increase supplies every year. Yep,
so we go, so our perishable supplies, our medications, our bandages, that type of stuff. The Public Safety Committee goes through that every year based on what, Chris Vernig is my firefighter paramedic that deals with all of our supply ordering. He puts a list together at the beginning of the year based on what costs are, and then we adjust those costs. And that's, goes through public safety, and then it gets sent to the billing company to adjust those costs. But the actual base costs, we have not changed, I don't believe, in 2 years.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Chad?
Following up on Alder Wood's question, I mean, it seems like every year our expenses are going up, 2 to 10%, maybe 5 on average. It looks like this year's budget is 5% increase. Any reason not to be bumping up that ambulance fee to kind of keep pace with the cost of our services?
Yes and no. It's kind of twofold in that we're pretty close to what everybody else in the area is charging right now. Some are charging more than others. Some charge just a flat fee. They don't bill for their, they don't do itemized billing. The other thing, trying to keep it lower for our residents, and we can look at, I can definitely put together the numbers for, and query every other department in Dane County to find out what they're charging, see where we're at, and come back with a number for the first council meeting, and to increase that, if that's what you want to do. The other thing is, we have a lot of Medicare patients that we transport. Medicare only allows us, or only pays us, a set fee.
Right.
Doesn't matter if we charge $10,000 per ambulance run, we're only getting 436. I don't know what the exact number is right now, but it's set. It doesn't matter what we charge. So when we turn around and look at that, supplemental insurance covers some of that. So it's whether or not we want to increase it to the residents and the non-residents. And
if I called for an ambulance and anyone who has health insurance, wouldn't that be billed for the ambulance, or is it?
Correct, yes. Yep, if you have health insurance, it'll go to your health insurance. If you're of Medicare age, it goes to Medicare, and then anything above that goes to the supplemental insurance that they may have.
I mean, I would just say my philosophy is that, every year we see the costs go up. It's true in government, it's true in business, and it's like if you don't keep your rates going up just ever so slightly to kind of correspond with that, then eventually we've got red tape, essentially. My gut would be that it's worth doing, but again, I know I don't want to do the work of committees at budget time.
It's one thing that I usually look at about every 3 years to do. I'm more than willing to, I'll put it together and present it at council.
I mean, I guess what I want to just say is that you've done a great job of making sure that we collect revenue for this stuff, so I don't want to sound like I'm being critical.
No,
I'm just asking the question, and you've always kind of been on top of that, so I just wanted to raise the issue.
Yep, and it's one of those, like I said, I do it about every 3 years.
Okay.
I reevaluate.
So would you most likely be doing it next year?
Most likely doing
for
it
the
next year.
2020
Yep.
budget?
That's fine.
Anyone else?
Just one quick thing. If you notice the salaries are up, that's because last year we hired a new employee, but they started later in the year.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the full year of that, and I think there's some that had some step increases, so that's the reason why the salaries look like they're high this year compared to last year.
Okay. Anyone else? Did you raise your hand, Molly? No. Okay, well, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Next up is Ryan, and I think maybe we'll do the open session part of library and then go into closed, and
Yeah.
Ryan can present and then leave, and we'll cover the rest of the.
Yeah, and I did email out today. There was some that had some personnel, or some increases. There's one in here. It's a hard copy of. There's a library, we increase hours, so Ryan will be talking about that. That's an open session thing. So we
So the
that's-
increased hours will be an open session?
Yeah,
Are
because
you
it's just
saying?
increasing
Okay.
hours, it's not a,
But the other one
The
will
other
be
one will be a
closed?
closed session.
Okay.
Hopefully I don't,
Get
not
confused.
swapping the two. I'll play it safe and then let me know.
Libraries on 111.
All right, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Go through this piece by piece here and let me know if you have any questions. All right. So, looking at pieces, I mean, I guess, I don't know, with salaries, is that something then that would be later?
no, you can talk about the salary.
All right, so the salaries is increasing from 756 to 370,001. Part of that is due to closed session. Oh, sorry, 353, 753. Part of that due to what will be discussed in the closed session. The other is increasing the tween and teen librarian position from 20 hours to 28 hours. And then the wages part-time would be 105,603 to 112,848. That is just the 2.5% increase along with a 50 cent raise for part-time positions that are making less than $15 currently, which includes the predominantly most of the library assistants that work the desk and then the shelvers that put away the books and process the books and back.
Actually, they didn't get the 2 point, they got just the 50
Oh,
cents. 'cause
sorry.
the 2 was higher
Thank you.
than,
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
it's not a combination.
Going down to the, so the auto circulation system rental is, that's kind of an interesting title for it, but essentially that's the South Central Library System, that's our regional library system, our fee annually. And part of that fee, they do the, the like infrastructure for the library, the networking, the PC support, the ILS. There's a software called Get It for acquisitions, and then My PC. That's if you're reserving a PC. Their fees were raised a little bit this year, and so this is reflecting that increase for those services. For office supplies, I've reduced it by 2,000. Just looking at the previous years, I believe that 3,000 is a more accurate amount of funding for office supplies in the library. Also postage going down from 200 to 175. The 200 is not necessarily, I feel like we can get by with 175. The only thing I'm gonna have to keep an eye on that is that the Monona Public Library in the past was part of WISCAT for ILL, OLL books out to throughout the state and bringing it back in. And this last year, we were not part of WISCAT, and I don't believe we will be next year. And so if we do send out items, it'll be through postage. So that might be, that we might take a hit on that, but looking at previous usage, I don't anticipate that to happen.
Most of the postage goes through the general fund, so that's why it's low
Great.
too.
The equipment maintenance repair and building maintenance repair, again, looking at this year, reducing that from 12,500 each to 12,000. I'm knocking on wood every time I bring this up because, as we all know, this building is old. We affectionately call it a Frankenstein building with the addition. This year, we've been pretty good with things. I wanted to keep that amount in there, though, because we are kind of one catastrophe away from really needing to use all of it. But I feel like we could reduce it by 1,000 collectively. And the periodicals, pamphlets, and AV software, 14,000 to 13,000. That's a reduction for that line item, but it's actually being then put into large prints. We're finding that our DVD purchases are pretty good, but our large print collection could definitely use a boost in funding. So I transferred $1,000 from one into the other. We're seeing our large print collection fly. It's actually on a standing order basis, so that popular titles just are kind of purchased, and we don't have enough to cover everything, and all the items are constantly gone. We're hearing from our patrons they'd like more large print books, so wanted to increase that. And I believe that is everything.
The only other thing is revenues. If you look at the county aid, if you add the two numbers together, it decreases by about,
$9,000.
$5,500 is a decrease in that line item.
And the county aid is determined by use of the building and circulation to non-residents. That is something that has decreased over the last few years. And we are looking to see what we can do to remedy that. It's a 3-year rolling average. I believe, talking with Dane County Library, this last decrease hopefully is the final one from kind of the repercussions of Fitchburg. I say repercussions as a bad thing, but as a resident of Fitchburg, I guess I'm happy about it. But Fitchburg got a public library. That took some of the circulation away from Monona, and so over time, that is why our county funding has gone down.
Questions, Doug?
Didn't Fitchburg coming online also meant that they were getting money instead of paying, previous to that, they had to pay the tax, the county library tax.
Correct.
That we're exempt from.
Yep.
So is that county aid going down mainly because of our circulation numbers, or is it a change in the overall library system? If you know.
Like just usage itself going down?
Right.
It is somewhat both. I would say more the former than the latter. Circulation is continuing to somewhat go down statewide, but it is slowing up for the last year or so. That the decrease is lessening, if I'm saying that right. So say 2 years ago, circulation was down 5%, then 1 year ago, it was down like 2.5%. So that's starting to plateau, but the initial is the biggest concern for us. But there are other areas that we could focus to just let areas know that we have a library that they may like. The biggest example being Cottage Grove, that they are a place without a library, that we do cater to that community, but we could also inform them a lot more of what we have, and that could boost circulation from them. That would increase the county payments as well as the surrounding areas.
So if I recall correctly, the county aid formula, at least in part, is based on how much non-Monona use we get of our library.
Non-Monona use of residents without a library is the biggest one. That's how it's been explained to me by the director.
Okay.
So it does get a little kind of wonky with all the,
Right.
with a metropolitan area, people are going to every library, however they'd like to, which is great. But we're seeing our door count increase dramatically. Our circulation is not increasing yet.
So you have a lot of people coming in to use the computers or
Yeah, in fact,
whatever programs and
So, for example, South Central has been working on a data dashboard, and they just included 2017 numbers because it's pulling from the annual report from DPI. And per capita, I was surprised but excited to see this. Per capita, Monona Public Library is #1 in the South Central library system at like 31.7 visits per capita. The next is 25. So people are coming here. We just are trying to determine what they're doing when they're here.
we don't necessarily count people if they don't go upstairs, do we? If they come down here for a program,
No, we count them.
then you count them while they're at the
The
program.
door count is on the outside door.
Oh, it's on the outside door, okay.
Yep, so we are counting them, I mean,
Okay.
which we should. I mean, they're coming to the building itself as a service, but also like the programs and stuff. If they're coming straight here to come to a program, they should be counted.
Yeah,
Or if they come and to the cafe and use the Wi-Fi, they should be counted.
okay. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to go into closed session to discuss, I think, all of these additional personnel things. We'll start with yours, Ryan, and then you can leave, and then we'll.
Sure.
So if you want to bring along the hand.
Or is it booked
We are
again?
going into is the other room empty?
I can.
I think it's empty.
Yeah. Do you want me to go ahead and read it? And then if she comes back, that's fine too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just that she dropped this off today, so.
Yeah. So Gillian Fink, 6307 Westgate Road. Excuse me. Wanted to register in favor of Chief Ostrenga's presentation of information that asked to add one more police officer to the police department. So. Okay, next up is our own Jake Anderson.
So we're gonna start with Jake has 4 funds he's gonna talk about. So we're gonna start with the park fund on page 94. And this is the one that includes the new employee that starts in
September 1.
And there's a little more information on that new employee in our packet that we had in the closed session. Okay, Jake?
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me again for budget time. The 2019 operating budget for parks, as Mark was saying, includes an additional full-time equivalent staff person to start September 1st. And the narrative in your handout kind of explains what's changed over the last 5 or 6 years and the amount of maintenance activities that are happening in our parks. This position would work closely with our other full-time position and take some of the time that I'm directly out in the field out of the equation. We've had a tremendous amount of opportunity and growth in the parks and utilization from the public and our taxpayers, and that's been awesome to see. But the flip side of that is it takes more time and effort to be able to keep everything looking nice and taking care of what we have. So really, in this parks budget, that's the big change that we would have. The other changes are basically a little bit of increases in the expenditures due to what we'll have on Riverfront and what some of our actuals have been. That's about all I have on the parks.
Any questions?
So you mentioned Riverfront. Will this take care of the increased needs that come out of Riverfront?
For 2019, yes.
That's fine. Okay.
Yeah, because we're looking at a 3-month, window. Depending on what happens with the ice rink, we'll have a much better idea at the end of 2019 it's going to probably take a year to see what those expenditures on utilities are going to be, lighting, electrical, et cetera, for the use of that. So I probably won't have a good idea until August of 2020 on where we're kind of at with that. But we keep that in there. It's just we know we're going to have increased expenditures from where we're at now. And then in the 2020 budget, we should have a better idea of what a whole year's worth is going to look like.
So there might be a need for additional staffing on top of that?
No, no. The staffing level, I think, this would be fine for what we have.
Okay.
Any other questions? Andrew?
I know I've asked you before, but as far as ordinance enforcement and looking at kind of a hybrid model that Madison has with a park ranger system, can you talk a little bit more? I know you talked to the Parks Board about why you're not in favor of that type of situation with this person, but what your ideas are maybe for the future.
Yeah, so I think one of the challenges that we have is our interactions with the public in parks, and especially those that are violating some of our ordinances. So the ability to try to discuss or tell someone that they're doing something wrong when they probably don't think that they're doing something wrong or don't care that they're doing something wrong can be challenging. And so even for myself, dealing with people in that type of setting, that's why we have a lot of training for our police officers on conflict resolution. We had discussed about the possibility of having a joint, park maintenance and park ranger position, but I think the challenges that we face just in park maintenance alone would be very difficult to say you're going to have to do these park ranger type of duties, which generally are looking at nights and weekends is when we see the greatest amount of infractions, or especially when we're having events. So what we're looking into is an option moving forward if we could contract out services with City of Madison or Dane County Parks on a trial basis and see what a park ranger in Monona on nights and weekends, and seeing what are the biggest challenges that we're having, that we're facing to all of our residents utilizing our parks, and is this a short-term or long-term potential solution? Nothing is identified in the 2019 budget for that, but as we move forward, especially with our recent dogs on leash ordinance, opening of a new park and not knowing exactly what the use is going to be, we do have an ordinance coming through the Parks Board second read this month for a smoking ban in a majority of parks. We are going to see those type of issues that are going to crop up where we are looking at enforcement. Thanks.
I know I have talked with our former administrator quite extensively about having the code enforcement person do at least some of the enforcement of the dogs running loose in parks during the day, since he's driving around town 20 hours a week. He says he's never seen a dog running loose in the park, so I don't really know. But I think that position is also one that could do some of these things, not necessarily working nights or weekends or whatever. But anyone else? Okay. What is next? Rec?
Community Center, 122.
122.
Did you guys get the operating budget notes in your packet? Okay, so that's like the cheat Cliff Notes version of any of the changes that we might have. So the community center has really been transitioning slowly, and this year in 2018 quickly into programming for the senior center and the park and rec department. So with the addition of our after-school program, which has been, at least for the first couple months, very successful and created a great amount of energy. We've added additional senior center programming during, on both levels during normal times and outside of our normal business hours. The age and the usefulness of the existing building, size, capacity, has reduced the amount of weekend night events, the revenue generating events. For our typical budget year, we're at about a third of what I would call like a Saturday night event. So like the weekend weddings, quinceaneras, family parties, and 2/3 ongoing user groups, which are including a Sunday church group that meets every Sunday. Those weekend Saturday night events, we used to allow them to set up Friday mornings for their event on Saturday. Now that we have an after-school program in the upper level, it's now Saturday mornings. That has had some effect on revenue collection. We are looking at our policies and looking at bringing forth a proposal potentially this year for the reduction or the removal of some of these night private gatherings at the community center and focus more on community use of the community center. So, for example, we have the PTO has a trivia night. We've had other PTOs do a theme party, so to speak, as a fundraiser. We've had Girl Scouts rent the building for the entire day for training, on a Saturday. So we're looking at what's the best use of the community center, the wear and tear on an older building from private, predominantly non-resident events. We're running about 60 to 70% of our rentals being non-residents, and what's the best bang for a buck. So as we look at what our actuals are for rental fees, we have increased those since 2018. That's where we see the biggest change in the community center budget.
Questions? Doug?
The general property taxes for the community center go up about 21,000. Could you, one of you at least explain that?
A little bit is because of last year we hired Jessica, so the administration assistant, which their time was allocated to 3 different funds: the community center, the pool, and also the rec budget. So this is mainly just a part of that. The increases in the salaries is related to it, and also if you look at the community center rental fees, there's a $4,600 about over $5,000 drop in just the revenues alone.
Right.
So it's kind of a combination of the two, is the increase in the salaries for the position and then the decrease in the revenues.
On the 2018 budget, if you see that last line transfer from the general fund, the 7,000, that was the inclusion of the transfer from part-time to full-time administrative assistant. So really, our last year's budget, once we made that position full-time, was roughly 139. But that is the change in salaries, and then the benefits is, 5,000, 4,000 more.
So it's paying for that position over the full year instead of just part of the year.
Right.
Okay.
'Cause previous it was just part-time.
Jeff?
Where is the revenue for the after-school program? Is that in a different?
Yeah, it's under the rec budget.
Oh, okay, okay.
Anyone else?
If you want to go to the rec, it's page 127 starts the rec.
Bear with me on this one, you guys, because the rec budget's had the most amount of changes from last year. We reallocated some of where we put our revenue and expenses to try to just track it a little bit better moving forward. So this year, we're proposing that our after-school program goes into a single line item so we can track that revenue and expense. So you'll see in the 2018 budget for rec programs, we had $114,000. 2019, a full year of the after-school program is $118,000. So that's kind of a pretty big change right there. This year's budget included only the months of September through December. So we didn't have a full year of realization in the 2018 operating budget. Now we'll have winter of 2019, which is actually part of the 2018-2019 school year, and then fall 2019-2020 school year. So we'll have a full year of revenue for the after-school program. The youth sports fees in 2018, we had $16,000. That was previously just youth baseball, softball. So when I first started, we had like 3 different line items for rec, and it was basically because we had 3 different types of programs. We had a summer playground program, we had youth baseball, and youth tennis. Those were like our 3 revenue line items. Over the years, we combined youth tennis into youth rec, and then youth baseball was still a standalone program. Based on the expenses that we have with our youth core sports programs, we decided to put all of our youth sports under one activity revenue GL account. So you see that difference of $16,000 to $41,000 for this year. So that would include soccer, flag football, baseball, softball, basketball, and volleyball. So we have started a fair amount of our core youth sport programs. And with that programs, you generally have, a T-shirt, which $7, $8 a piece per kid. You add that up, it starts to become a fair amount of dollar amount. So on the expense side, then we have a youth sports expense account as well. That goes from $7,000 to $15,000 on the expenditure side. And that covers all the extra expenses for uniforms and supplies for those sport programs. You also have an expense side for the after-school program, which is a brand new account. And then the rec programs, we have adult rec, which would cover any recreation programs we have for adults. And then our rec program fees, which would be youth rec. While that shows a decrease, not as much of a decrease because we are proposing that we will be adding a summer day camp program this next year due to the success of our after-school program and families looking at full day care during the summertime with the facilities that we have through the community center and our parks and the pool. We'll be offering that program as well. So we'll extend a normal afternoon program to a full day and work with the school district to work kind of around the summer school, which is the first 4 weeks of summer.
So kids who come just to your regular rec department summer programs will be included in some of those?
Correct. Yep, we'll still
daycare
have offerings
programs
for
as
like
well?
a la carte programs that 1 hour long programs,
Okay.
and then also have those type of, full day activities as well.
Are the revenues from the day camp included in the after-school program fee line?
No. They're part of that 93,000, part of the
okay.
rec program fees.
Okay.
So Jay, as it relates to the summer camp program, well, first of all, is it safe for us to assume that even though you're not itemizing those various programs within the now kind of bundled budget line items, that they're unbundled somewhere within your own office, so it's, so that you know if
Absolutely.
softball's tanking or
Right.
or the camp's doing well and the after-school is not doing well or whatever, even though we're looking at a bundled.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely. But we
Okay.
like to have, on a general rec program, there are some that may be able to accommodate a number of kids, and that may show excess revenue, but that may help offset a new program that may have 8 or 10 kids. You know, for example, we're starting a Dungeons and Dragons program. Not something you'd normally consider with a park and rec, but we respond to the community. We've had some families say, hey, we're interested in offering this. And I said, cool, let's do it. And so we had one of our lifeguard instructors, well, that class, we have to, you have to buy some kits. I didn't know nothing about Dungeons and Dragons, other than it seems like, I'm not even sure, but we had to buy some stuff to make the program go. The first session will probably lose a little bit of money.
Some chains and stuff.
Yeah, I just went down, there's a board and some action figures and.
Dragon food.
Yeah, it's, so that gives us a flexibility on a year-to-year basis. But yeah, we do track each program, to see
Okay.
where we're at.
So then my question is, as it relates to this new summer camp, I guess I'm just wondering, I mean, obviously, we've, as a community, as you just pointed out, you've added every year, you've added more and more and more activities and more and more and more events for the community, which is great. But I guess I'm wondering if you could speak to the whole summer camp thing a little bit more, because among other things, I know from looking at the summer, Isthmus and a variety of other places that, Wisconsin's pretty well known for its day camps, not to mention its overnight camps. And there are other summer camps right here in Monona that we would be competing against, at Aldo Leopold and at Rutabaga and at other places. So can you speak to where the need is coming from and
Sure.
what kind of expense and why we think we're best suited to do something like that, to serve that particular need?
Yeah. All of our programs are based on what our community asks of us to do. And so from our after-school program, the success of that, the ability of families that live close to here, can walk here, can utilize our park, can utilize our pool, it all stems from what families are bringing to us and saying, we would really like for you guys to offer this type of thing because we love the convenience of being able to send our kids from 4 to 5 blocks away to stay right in the park. We love our pool, we love our library, we love our park and rec department. The influx of families that we've seen move into Monona, the vast majority of them that are moving in are looking at full day care. And that full day sometimes goes beyond the scope of what some of the private businesses in town are offering. So you're talking 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning till 5+ at night. So that's where I think the offering has come from, is that we can do it affordable, we can do it local, we can provide jobs to our Monona kids, high school and college age students, and we respond to really what our local families that are participating in our programs are asking of us.
This is really different than a camp like Aldo Leopold. This is a daycare program, right? I mean, you're calling it a summer
Right.
camp, but Aldo Leopold has these 1 week or 2 week camps that people sign up for.
Right.
Correct? This is different than that. It's the whole it's a summer daycare, is what it is.
Right, because I was
Isn't that
gonna
correct?
say, I mean, if I'm in a family where both people work, if I'm dropping my kid off at 7 o'clock and picking him up at 7 o'clock, that's definitely daycare. It's not a camp.
Right.
And And it's not gonna do me much good if it doesn't go the entire summer.
Correct, yep.
And
So-
that's will, right?
Correct,
It's
yeah,
not-
it's the first day that school's out till the last day that we're on vacation.
And so are you surveying people to find that when you say it's
Yeah.
all based on community input? You're surveying?
Yep, we send out annual surveys to our families that participate in our programs and, you know, are always asking for ideas. And a lot of times it's just coming through to, you know, word of mouth. But, and I can't speak to Rutabaga, but I can speak to all of Leopold. They're doing quite fine to the fact of wait list and over-programmed of the facility, that they would like to use our park for additional
Right.
camps that
and
they
they're,
have.
in fact,
So there's
expanding their facilities
there's a
so that they can
lot of
expand their
kids,
offerings,
a
right.
lot of kids in this area, and there's
Right.
a lot of room for all these camps. We're specifically looking at how we can accommodate our local Monona families in our programs.
And as part of that, kids who are home all day and want to come to one or two programs,
Yep.
they'll be in the same program with these kids
Yeah,
who you'll have
yep,
all
we'll
day,
have
correct?
we'll have those weekly options.
Which
and-
you've been offering for years.
Correct.
Any other questions? Okay, what's pool? Is that the
Last
thing?
one's the pool, which is page,
Sorry, can I just
137.
ask one more question related to that? Which is, again, I'm just throwing this out there as a, I guess I'm just wondering if it makes sense to be adding, it seems like that's a big undertaking. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe a daycare center is not that big of a deal. But it just seems like that's a pretty big undertaking, and I'm just wondering, given that we have a brand-new park that's also going to be a gigantic undertaking in terms of, at the same time that you're going to be running that, you're going to be trying to build a $200,000 concession stand and figure out how that whole thing's going to operate and all that. I mean, I just wonder if we're just a little concerned about biting off more than we can chew. Is that... You don't think it's an issue?
I'm not worried about it. We hired 2 full-time people this last year. One person specifically, the majority of her job is in after-school. She'll be taking over the majority of our recreation programs, including summer rec. As we move forward to Riverfront, we have a plan in place for the programming and whose responsibilities are for it. I have excellent staff, and they are more than capable of doing this.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, pool. Page 138, 137, I guess.
Swim pool. Let's hope for good weather in 2019. We will have a full year, no all-city swim meet. So the 2018 budget, I'd probably maybe reference 27, take a look at 2017 and 2018, because 2018 had reflected decreases in revenue and expense and some revenue lines due to the all-city swim meet that we were closed for 10 days. So when you look at patch sales, for example, we had 52,000 budgeted in 2018. We were right around 60,000 for our total. 2017, we were at 61,000. We have a fee increase this year, so we have our expected budget of 65,000 on season pass sales. It's a $10 per family, $5 per individual increase. And it's been 3 or 4, maybe even 5 years since we've had an increase in season pass sales at the pool. Daily admissions, for example, we had 54 in 2018. Historically, we've set that number at 60, and that puts us at 90 days that we're in operation roughly, and so that's kind of our standard. The concessions show a little bit of an increase there, but again, a lot of these individual line items, basing it on 2018, were due to being down or closed for 10 days. We also have that same line item, that 7,135, that would be added to your 2018 for the addition of our administrative assistant. So when you see that difference in the tax levy, you have to add that 7,135 in. Park Board did propose to increase the wages for the part-time by a quarter. Is that right, Andrew? Quarter? I think it's in there. The 25 cents over their adjustment. That was a Park and Rec Board and recommendation. Yeah, for the lifeguards, yep. And then we look at some of our actuals. Otherwise, it's status quo for the pool.
Questions? Chad?
What are we paying our lifeguards now?
$8.75 was the wage for last year, so we'd be looking at a $9 starting per hour.
Then do they get an increase after a certain amount of time, or?
Yeah, then per year, if they come back, it's generally a 50-cent increase, per hour. They get more per hour if they teach swim lessons. In comparison, Madison pays $13.56 an hour to start. Which, yeah, it's the seasonal lifeguards, especially. There's a nationwide shortage of seasonal lifeguards. We did okay last year. I think it speaks to aquatics director Missy Kozorski and her leadership at the pool. She does a great job in her training. Actually, we offered a free training class. So one of the challenges to being a lifeguard is you have to be certified. Most of those classes can be $200 to $300. Well, that cuts, if you're working 10 to 15 hours a week, that's like 2 months of your, what you're making in the summer. There was a state law, maybe nation law, that allows 15-year-olds to lifeguard. And so that's something that we brought into slowly last year. And we'll probably continue to do that. Now, with 15-year-olds, the only thing that comes into play is wage and hour laws and when you can give them a break. So there's a certain scheduling we have to do with 15-year-olds that we don't have to necessarily do with 16-year-olds. But yeah, it's a challenge when Madison pays what they do. Not the other public pools aren't paying that much. So Middleton, we compare ourselves more with Middleton and Sun Prairie outdoor pool than we do with Goodman. At City of Madison. So sometimes we have kids leave, staff leave to go to Madison, and then they come back because they're not getting as many hours or maybe more of a challenging job. But yeah, long term, we're looking at 40 to 45 lifeguards or, plus admission and concession staff. It's a big number. It looks like a big number on a spreadsheet, but it's 15 to 18, 20 kids working per day at 90, 100 days a week, plus training. So yeah, ideally we would love to be able to pay them more, keep them here longer. I think when I first started, we would average 3 to 4 years per staff member, and now it's much more 1 to 2. The competition for seasonal staff in this area is very difficult. If you're a seasonal, maybe not lifeguarding per se, but $15 an hour is, and my wife's in HR, Sarah, if you're watching, hi, and she jokes that, she goes, if you're not paying $15 an hour, good luck, in this area.
Well, I mean, I asked the question in part because we've been trying as a city to kind of practice what we preach, and it's not just a matter of pragmatism, it's also just a matter of values. Who, even a kid, a teenager who's got a job, paying them that wage, I don't think makes a lot of sense. And so it sounds to me like you're confirming that, in fact, the result of us keeping these salaries low when we've been trying to raise the bar in other departments is that, you're not able to retain people, and we're spending a lot of time training them. We invest in their training. Maybe they get that certification at Monona, and then they can go off to Goodman Pool and make 50% more, and why wouldn't they? So, I think we need to be looking seriously at that. I don't, there's a lot of change going on in your department, and I commend you for all of the expansion of services and listening to our citizens, and I think doing, a great job at setting a model in Dane County. But because all that change is going on, it's hard for us to really keep our eye on the ball of like, what are the things that should be tweaked and what are the things that are doing just fine. But I think you confirmed for us my concern, which is that, I think looking at those salaries is a very serious short-term issue. And we're getting by right now on the cheap.
I did misspeak about the starting wage, because Alderwood had got that through last year's budget, I think was the full consensus of the council to raise the starting wage. So we did start at $9.
Okay.
This year in 2018. So we
Okay.
did, so this proposal would be the starting wage at $9.25, and then it's a 50 cent to I think up to a 75% increase per year that you work here if you make enough hours and et cetera.
So to Chad's point, though, if or to follow up on what Chad's saying, I know you don't have a magic ball, so you don't know how many people are returners, multiple year returners versus newbies, starting at 9. But, if you had to, if instead of a quarter as an increase for 2019, if it was 50 cents per, let's say, could you come back to us with, what that would do to your budget, for consideration?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yep. Yeah, we use a average number of hours, times an average wage, basically look at what last season was and what we anticipate for that average wage. So certainly we can get that. And see what that
somebody else
would
might
come up
want
to.
more than 50 cents, but in the interest of continuing to try to bump it up. I don't know of a kid that gets paid less than 10 to babysit these days, or 11 or 12, never mind, so it's hard for me to imagine a kid overseeing a whole pool with training for that amount of money. But, especially with a tight labor market.
Anyone else? Is that everything for parks?
I think so.
For you, Jake?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Joan. Yep. Just page 35.
It's 35, 36.
Hi, everybody. I don't get any new parks or new trucks or nothing. You're getting new machines, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think what I would, speaking of salaries, election inspectors get paid minimum wage, so you know, but they love it, the job. There aren't a lot of changes in my budget. Mark
Want to
was-
start with clerk? 35.
Clerk, yeah, the biggest change, what is the biggest change? Biggest change is postage, and I think we were just looking at historic numbers and trying to get that up to what we really actually do spend. And all departments' postage is in this account, so it's not like just the clerk sends out this much in mailings, even though I do a lot of mailings, but still.
There is other postage on other accounts, very limited, as they might do something outside of our postage machine. So if they have a charge on there, it's usually they went straight to the post office or FedEx or something like that. But 99% of it comes through this account.
Does this include the newsletter?
No.
No,
Okay.
that's a separate and newsletter cost. But this would be tax bills would be in here, absentee ballots would be in here, anything the library sends out, court sends out, and then, the court is the one who has quite a bit of, court and the library have, quite often have a larger mailing, every month, and so that's all lumped in here. Election
I think
is.
Jen had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So did we recover those costs for court then?
Pardon me?
Do we recover those postage costs for court then?
I think we used to sort it out. And it is charged on the postage machine, to the various accounts, and do we still charge those out?
No, we don't charge them all, we keep them all in one account. What we do, like increased, court revenues increased by $10,000. We are sending those bills out, and we are recapturing the revenue in there. As far as election, before she starts, this is kind of an odd one. This budget's basically been the same. She did go down a little bit this year. It's been the same since I've been here, about 14 years, because this fluctuates so much every year. As you look in 2015, we only spent $5,000. In 2016, it was the president election, so we spent a lot more. And in 2017, it was a down year. And this year will probably be a little higher than the past because of the governor election. So it just goes up and down. So instead of just going up one year and down next year, we just keep this basically the same every year. Keep that from fluctuating.
The change, we went down in service contracts because the machines are digital and they're less expensive to maintain. It's kind of a nice benefit there. Public notices went down a little bit. Again, that was based on actual use. For larger elections, I mean, every election has public notices that have to be published by law. And so they there's a finite amount of public notices that have to be done every year, no matter what. So that kind of stays the same too. So really, it didn't change that much. Election supplies did go down. I'm using up old envelopes because the Wisconsin Elections Commission changes that envelope style randomly all the time. And so I end up with boxes of envelopes. I try to keep the ordering down because I know there's going to be a change. Right now, still Wisconsin 1, the lawsuit is still pending, so the 28-day residency requirement could come back. It's 10 days now, so that changes an entire envelope design because that number 28 or 10 is on there. So we either hand write in 10 over the 28 or buy stickers to put over them or whatever we do. But now they've totally reconfigured the envelope design, and I went through several back and forths with the design people at the post office, and if you ever want to beat your head against the wall, that's what you should be doing. And and it finally came out that we got it right, and it was supposed to make the new postage machines can't tell the difference between one side of the envelope and the other, apparently, so they were canceling the wrong side of the envelope, and the absentee ballot was being mailed back to the resident. To the voter. This didn't happen a lot, but it happened enough to be a problem. And any time that would happen would be a problem. But it was definitely getting to be a bigger problem. So to fix that, they decided to, WEC decided to reconfigure the envelope certificate side to portrait instead of landscape. And I thought, oh man, this is going to be a nightmare because we have them lined up in a box like this, so we can read them, but it's actually working out pretty good. So right now it should have solved the problem. However, one of the ballots I had to mail to Madison to take to a nursing home was returned to the voter. So the post office still can't handle it. So I don't know what we're going to do next. So we just keep doing the best we can to get the ballots out. So, and then we are, I might be trying to work on, if the legislature won't let us put the ballots in the voter machine at the time that somebody votes absentee, we might have to figure something out because we are getting just overwhelmed in these general elections in November. Staff can't handle it. We have to hire extra staff. So all week we have, this final week of the election, we're having 3 election inspectors come in every day just to handle the absentees. And today we did get probably 10 registrations, I want to say, and I know at least 50 ballots, yeah. The turnout's going to be amazing, and, but this is, when you have that much traffic, that's 2 or 3 people an hour or more during our 9 hours of operation. You don't really get anything else done, so we need to get help. So I'm going to work on, I don't know what else to do to make this better, but.
So if I could ask a question, because I wanted to know. So we're still not allowed by Wisconsin law to count ballots prior to Election Day? Is that
Right.
accurate? Even
Yes.
if you have all the regular oversight there?
You can't put them in a
Right,
machine.
and,
Right.
The term early voting gets thrown around, and that really is not what happens in Wisconsin, and it's not legal in Wisconsin. But it is a sort of generic term now,
Mhm.
because it's been around so much. But we do absentee voting. The ballot is, even if the legislature allows us to put a ballot into the voter machine, it will be counted, but it's not cast until the Board of Canvassers certifies the results of an election. So it still isn't early voting, even if we can put it in the machine. This is Wisconsin law. Every state has variances, so, but it would solve the problem of a person having to fill out an envelope for every single absentee ballot that each voter needs to fill out an envelope. We have to keep track of those envelopes until Election Day and continually file the 50 to 75 we get every day, continually data entry. We'd still have to do the data entry, but that's not long at all. But the filing, continual filing, and trying to find storage space and find boxes that fit them, and trying to do all of that and keep it all going, that would be eliminated. So, and then it would also, I think, make voters more confident that their ballot was actually being counted. We still have people who insist on absentee voting in person, but still question the process. You're not really going to count my ballot.
I've had people say that to me at the polls.
Yeah, you're gonna throw my ballot away. You're not gonna. And I'm like, why are you doing it if you don't trust the system? But that's not what I say to them. To them, I say, yes, we absolutely are going to count your ballot, and we are absolutely keeping your ballot secure, and we want everybody's vote to count. So that's our whole goal. So. Something needs to be done though, because not just Monona, every community. This is budget season for every community. This is a lot of other things that are going on. I mean, I still have to pay the bills. I mean, we still have things we have to do, and there's no time. You know, and Aline was working when I got here at 5:30. She was still filing those ballots. So it's an amazing amount of work. To do this, and we're going to meet on Saturday and pre-process them, which Election Commission prefers we did not do, but somebody surveyed, and there's at least 25 respondents who do that, because you can't get it done at the polling place. You just can't. You'd be working on it till 10 o'clock at night on Election Day to get those through. So we need to find a way to streamline it. The only thing I've heard that seems reasonable, well, the really cool one would be if we had Election Day as a holiday.
Yes.
Then no one would have to go absentee.
Yes.
And then the other would be this being able to at least put it into the machine. It's in the machine, then the ballot is anonymous, in the machine, counted every day. I know there's a lot of processes we'd have to learn to accommodate that system, banging them up every day, keeping them secure. Various processes we have to do, but that's better than what we're doing now for us to, we're making it work now, absolutely. But it's just the world stops when it's absentee voting time, so, you know, for clerks. So we still want to take your water bill, you know.
Do you know about what percentage of our voters will likely vote using the absentee ballot system this time?
I know it's increased. I would say we've had up to a 30% turnout before the election happened.
Okay.
So we're already up to 800 ballots, and we have 4 more days, and these are the big days, crunch
Right.
days. But already having 800 at this point is a lot. Our normal election is 200 for an entire election, 200 to 250. So when you have a governor or presidential, we had 1,600 at election day, absentees. So the argument is that, well, if, you know, people will say, well, if you have all those absentee voters, then there'll be less at the polling place. But I think even Mayor O'Connor will say, if you have more absentees, you have more people at the polls. It's just, it doesn't, and each of those absentees has to be dealt with at the polls. It's not like it's done.
It's like a 5-step process. For
Yeah.
each envelope.
Each
It's
en-
crazy. It's just.
Yeah, each envelope. So it doesn't decrease, it doesn't, but it'll never go back. I mean, it'll never go back to the original intent of that law. I don't think the legislature, when they opened it to anyone, could do it. I don't think they realized how popular it would be. But we're dealing with it, and it's great. I mean, I do love to see, there's nothing like having people come in and vote. I love to see them, and people are so positive at this point. Don't have too many people coming in complaining, which is awesome. They're just there and really happy to be able to vote, and then we're happy to be able to provide it. So we're, we make it work, but we just need to make it better. It just can't, it's really hard to handle it. And when I didn't have a deputy clerk, and especially a deputy clerk as awesome as Aline, I was working every night till 8 o'clock, 8:30 this week of election season. So it's pretty tough. So we're ready, but we are ready, you know. But we'll be hauling a lot of ballots. So.
Okay, anybody else have any questions?
I just wanted to, just for clarification, first of all, I wanted to say, I think we all applaud. We know it's tough this time, and we all applaud it. Applaud the voting, applaud the interest, and applaud the integrity with which you're undertaking the whole process. And I certainly appreciate some people being skeptical about that, given the stories that we hear in other parts of the country and other places. And I want to reassure Monona residents that we are exercising that integrity. And I'm just curious, too, because I've been blown away by some of the reports, for instance, of voting machines that are 19 years old that states are still using. Can you tell, how old is the machine that we're ultimately feeding things in? Do you know how old our machine is?
Our DS200s are less than 5 years old.
Okay.
We just changed from, the Eagle Optech counters were amazing. I mean, they worked amazing. Ours never went down. The only time it crashed was when somebody pulled on the tape and jammed it. And it was human, that
Right.
did that. And my husband would laugh, he's an IT guy, and you take the lid off, and it was just like wires and stuff in there. It was this crazy thing, And now you open up the DS200, and you're like, where's the parts? I mean, there's no parts in here. So it's digital, and it's awesome. I'm loving it. I didn't love it when they made me get the plastic ballot box, though, because it's tippy, but other than that, not tippy for a voter, but when you're moving it, you have to transport. So, yes, and thank you for the pat on the back. I appreciate that. I did do a PSA on the radio. I don't know if you've heard it on WVMO about election security. And just everybody that's listening, your ballot right now is locked up, so don't worry, we got it. We have your ballot. So, yeah, the machines are new, and then the express vote is brand new and replaced the 40-pound doorstop that was the Automark, and that is the that never worked. And this machine is designed for people with any sort of disability. It can be hearing impaired, visually impaired. There's a sip and puff option, various visual, not just low vision, not just blind, but low vision. So there's contrast and make it bigger and look. But anyone can use it, and it's really fun. And I would say give it a try, because the screen comes up. You cannot make, it won't let you make a mistake. unless you choose the wrong voter. No, I'm sorry. Wrong candidate. Do not vote. No, I'm kidding. Sorry. But it won't let you vote for more than one person. It won't let you, if you would choose to skip an office, it says, are you sure you want to skip the office? And you can say, yes, I do. And, you know, it's just a wonderful thing. And it's really just a printer. Doesn't count anything, doesn't save anything, doesn't do anything except print. So it prints out your ballot and then you put it in the DS200 like any other voter. So it's an awesome option for anyone to use, and it's really slick. And that's just a huge improvement also, so.
And it's great if you're running low on big ballots.
Yes, can
Right.
be
So you
used,
can use
yeah.
that.
We probably
We've done that.
knock whatever this is made out of, have never run out of ballots, but you could use that if we were getting close, so.
Anything else? Okay, thank you,
All right.
Joan.
Thanks, Joan.
Now it's on to Mark.
Tough one to follow.
You what?
Tough to follow.
Yeah.
First, we're gonna start with
Yeah.
revenues.
Yeah.
Some changes that happened throughout the year here. On page 16, kind of go through here, some of the major changes. Personal property tax, I think we talked about last week. This is a new tax with the change in the personal property tax law, and this number comes straight from the Department of Revenue. Taxes from other exempt entities. These are some nonprofits they're called payment in lieu of taxes. Each year we increased it from 50,000 up to 55,000. It's averaging about 55,000. It's 15 and 16, there was a timing issue on that. Otherwise, in 17, even this year, in 18, will come in about 55,000. So a lot of that's due to their taxes are still based on kind of like the mill rate. So they're basically paying the exact taxes what everybody else is, but they're just exempt from the tax roll.
Who's included in that?
Places like Aldo Leopold is one of them. Monona Metals, Monona Hills,
Goodwill.
Goodwill is another one. There's one more, Dane County Housing. There's one Dane County Housing one. That's small. Make up that. Intergovernment aid. This is where the big one was for the transportation aid, where it decreased from 754,000 down to 678,000. I suspect this is going to decrease one more time, and then it's going to level off based on the 6-year rolling average I've been looking at. Another one, if you go down to license and permits, I just put the one group number, but buildings and permits, we're eventually going to come back here fairly soon with some changes to our fee structures for building permits. Just recently working with GEC, they came to me actually and were concerned about our rates that were actually low right now, that he thinks that some of our, where our building permit structure is set up, they're actually losing money in some of our permits. So we're taking a hard look at that, and we'll come back here with a new updated permit fee structure with that. There's a big one, excavation permits. Basically, this is same as a right-of-way permit. So as you see, the year-end estimate was 31,000. Last year's budget was 6,500, and this year we bumped up to 20,000. So these are these big permits that are coming through right now with hopefully TDS will come through. AT&T and all these fiber optic lines are going through right now. So they have to pay the permit, right-of-way permit fees. So we know some are going to come in next year, so we increase that for next year, and hopefully the next couple of years or so that will kind of stabilize right around that dollar amount.
Before we get off this page, can I ask an elementary question?
Sure.
So the 29, at the very top, general property taxes, at the 2019 budget, it says 3.1 million.
Yeah.
The proposed is 2.8. Does,
So
what,
when we first started working on this budget, that's what it was, 3,135,000.
oh, if everything was able to go.
Yeah,
through.
and then
Okay,
we made
gotcha.
these changes
Sorry.
and got it down to
Yep.
2.85. Next page is a couple of big ones, is the fines and forfeitures. So the first one, court penalties and cost, increased that from 175,000 to 195,000. Just based on kind of what's been going on. 2017 was 192,000. 2018 will probably be 195 or maybe a little bit above. And we propose to increase that by 20,000, just kind of based on that. And also with these grants they've been writing lately, we do notice an uptick in the revenue we are getting from seatbelt grants, OWI grants that we've approved through council. So there is, we're paying that cost for the extra overtime, but we are getting the revenue on the other side on those. Parking violations, just increase that a little bit, just based on kind of the trend with that fund. Do notice if the bad winters usually increase the fines. It seems like a lot of it's based on weather related. It seems like depends on the weather is in the wintertime. It's kind of where those permit fees go up or the parking violations go up or down. I've noticed. So we're expecting a bad winter this year, but just in general, they've been going up and up, so we increased that. Next, just some minor ones in public charges for services. We did increase park shelter rentals from 21,000 to 23,000, just kind of based on the trends with that account. So miscellaneous revenues, interest income, we did increase that 30,000. That probably be that one might be, that's a give or take a little bit. We probably could increase that a little bit by. I think it's kind of where it should be. We have some large dollar balances in the TIFs, and we're starting to pay off some larger debt. We're closing TIF 2 out, so our overall general balance is going to be shrinking a little bit. That's why I included it at 125, and where you see your estimates at 150 with that. So that was the rationale behind that. So insurance recoveries. I just want to touch on that one quick because we talked about a couple of days ago. Workers' comp was going up. We decreased it by $6,000 because our premiums coming back from the recoveries has roughly been right around 40,000 or 37,000. I think this year we're going to be right around 40,000. So I adjusted that down with that. And lease and rental payments, that's just based on an annual lease increase every year for basically there's cell towers and ATC pays in there too. This big one for city properties, I just want to touch on this a couple minutes, just a couple seconds. Year-end estimates for sales of city property, it says 20,000. We just actually sold 4 vehicles at auctions that came in about 30,000. So that 20,000 actually should be about 50,000.
Did you sell that fire truck?
This fire truck, actually, Scott thinks he has a department coming up from, I think, Alabama or Georgia to take a look at it. Their fire truck got started on fire, so it burned up. So they're looking to get one quick, and he'll be coming up here to negotiate, hopefully, to buy this one. So hopefully, they're coming soon.
I mean, if they're coming out there, they have to drive back somehow.
Yeah, I asked him that same question if they'd drive it back. He said they would, if they bought it, they would just drive it back. Transfers to other funds. Just kind of explain what these are. So these are, a lot of these we allocate, so like the insurance, a lot of the payroll, a lot of other costs, administration costs, are just included in the general fund for some of these funds, and we don't allocate it out. So these are costs we allocate to different departments for basically, for us doing the payroll, the payables, administration part of it. So these are charges actually to these departments that they transfer the money back into the general fund because all the costs related are recorded in the general fund. So a lot of it's in there, insurance. And then the last one is that fund balance applied that we kind of talked about in detail at the first meeting. Next would be
Before we leave that, I want to go back to the previous page just for a second.
Sure.
On the general property taxes that were initially proposed, I assume that's the $3,135,000. That's
Yeah.
what came out of committees, the total ask out of all the committees?
Only for the general fund committee. So anything related to the general fund.
Right, the general property taxes.
Yeah. No, I mean, just the general fund. Each,
Right.
like 205 would have their own. That's all.
Yeah. Anyway, and then the mayor cut it down to to what's proposed. In under previous mayors, those numbers would have been the same because committees were kind of given marching orders to, this is what it's gonna be, which really hurt, made the whole process less useful.
Correct.
So
Yeah, I would agree. Alex.
kudos to the mayor for being open to I know it makes more work for you and her to cut it down, but it's a lot more useful process, so.
Remember, we always used to get the orders of 0% increase,
Right.
which is unrealistic.
And we did, when I first started here, we used to get the goal was a -3 budget. So that was that's what we did. That's where we actually reduced a lot of staff at the time and kind of cut a lot of stuff back 13, 14 years ago. Page 32 is the finance department. Really no change in here other than just a salary and one little change in other supplies. That's on page 32. The other changes to the non-personnel is other supplies and expenses from 1,300 to 1,500. That's all that account. The next would be kind of the TIFs. Actually, debt service. Debt service. The debt service is on page 151. As you can see in 2019, there was an increase here. These go tie exactly into the payment schedules, the debt repayment schedules. We did use fund balance applied. A lot of that is for, we had a lot of special assessments. We would budget like 50,000 each year, and sometimes we received up to $200,000 extra, so we were building up our fund balances. And so now we're kind of using that fund balance to repay some of the debt that was built up. That's where the 300,000 kind of is coming from. 200,000 is a transfer in from the general fund. That's part of that fund balance number that we talked about. Page 152 is TIF2 debt service. This will basically be renamed the year after as Renew Monona. So this $1,565,000 is the amount that's going to be used for Renew Monona. Again, the CDA is working on their policy that eventually will come here to the city council. So that $1,577,000 is basically what we'll have for that program starting next year. Library debt service, this is one we did make an adjustment here on page 153. So basically what happened here is we paid off the loan for the debt service for the library. What we ended up doing, we advanced the money from one of the TIF number 6. So they pay it off and save us a ton of interest. So now we're just paying it, we can pay it back as we go. So we're paying off $100,000 this year. We'll have a balance of $450,000 left to pay after this.
We're not paying any interest on that.
We don't pay any
right?
interest on it, it's just, that's all paid off. So the TIFs are pretty straightforward. We'll just kind of go on. Basically, all these TIFs are basically just going to be principal and interest payments, and we have to have in each year we have to pay to renew each TIF. It's $150,000, $150, I mean. So on page 154, this is TIF 4, which is, just so everybody knows, I kind of go through what these are. This is Monona Drive. This stretches basically from a little above Quick Trip all the way to Nichols. So that's basically TIF 4. I don't know if you remember last year we did a subtraction in TIF 4 because there was a property, water tower, I think it was one of the water tower buildings, that weird shaped building, I can't remember the name of it, Monona Drive. That was having the value was going backwards. So we took that, subtracted it off, and made a huge difference. It went from increment gain from 299,000 to basically 395,000 with that. We do, as you notice, there is a little bit of, if you look at the revenues minus the expenses, we are paying more than what we're receiving, but these have been set up as donor districts, so we have large balances to pay back these loans. So TIF 2 at one time was a donor district to 4 and 5. This is kind of the same with TIF 5. This is, I know it as Garden Circle, but most of the people know it as MSP, which is the buildings right behind Ken's, is this TIF. This is probably the most difficult TIF that we ever had to do, just because there wasn't a lot of value to what we had to pay for, but it was more of cleaning up the area. So this again, we have a little bit more expenditures than we do revenues. This is why we kind of have the donor districts we had in the past. But we do have enough increment built up to make all the payments. TIF 6. This one, I just want to hit on this a little bit because this was affected by Menards. I see at one time, in 2015, we made an increment about 712,000, and that's when Menards, after that, had their assessments came in and changed. They didn't actually file a protest as a lawsuit, but they came in and basically had the same lawyer that kind of worked with, same type of lawyer that worked with Walmart, and they got their assessment reduced. So it had an effect here. We lost basically, at the time, a little over $100-some thousand. A lot of the result was from the Menards, because that affected some of the other areas within that district. But for this one, we are actually receiving more increment than our principal and interest payments, so we're actually building up a balance in that fund. And that's actually UW Madison, UW Clinic and Meriter. That was the two projects involved in that. TIF 7 is Fairway Glen. Again, just the principal and interest. Again, here's another one where we had a subtraction. We took out from the bank, I believe right past Fairway Glen, I think right past McDonald's, we subtracted basically from McDonald's up, we tracked it all the way went up to the high school. On our side, we take all those properties out of that TIF, and it had a major impact of the increment. You can see it from 101 to 156,000. This TIF could be closed in 3-4 years if we wanted to. We'll have everything paid off in, I believe, in 3 years, based on the projections. Next page, 158, is TIF 8, which is Tresta. Here is probably one of the best TIFs we have right now as far as the increment. 2017 was our first full year of increment. As you can see, it's steadily growing in value. And just recently, we refinanced a bunch of loans to go into long-term debt. Make some principal payments, so you can see there's some larger principal payments in 2019 compared to 2018. Even with those larger payments, we are almost $150,000 additional surplus we're getting for that TIF. The next page is TIF 9, which is the current riverfront project. Right now, it's basically fund balance supply. This number will kind of change. We have we borrowed a bunch of money. We're doing a lot of the road projects, right-of-way improvements, and it's basically construction projects and interest on debt we're paying right now. So this is kind of an estimate, but it's all still goes back to what the project plan is. We are actually receiving a little bit of increment this year, and we'll see a little bit more in 2020, but the full amount will come in 2021. We'll start receiving some large payments in that district, and actually the district will be okay. And next page is we call Parkland funds. Everybody's aware what this is, so keep it in here. We don't have anything budgeted or receiving any money. This is payment. So if a developer comes in or anybody comes in and builds adds rooms, they must pay a certain percentage or give us land. So they can either give us parkland or they can do a payment in lieu of parkland. So if you look in 2015, that would have been the money received from Tresta. We transferred it at that time to a capital project, which is used to basically pay for part of Lotus Park. Currently, we don't have anything for 2019 yet. We don't have any projects that, right now that's, as far as the developers agreements right now, we will get money from Steve Dorn's, the Riverfront project, but if you read the development agreement, that goes back to him in a certain, there's a deal with it in the developers agreement, so there's actually no in and out in that one, so it has zero effect, so I didn't put that in here. But for right now, I think it's about $1,200 per unit is what you get. And the last one would be on transit, the very last fund is transit. Just so you know, I first started here, former Mayor Call. He tried to cut the whole program. They used to bring in busloads of people. And then Mayor Miller, he was always skeptical about the transit and kind of tasked the transit committee to increase their ridership. And right now, 2018 is on pace to be the highest year that we've had on record. So they've done their duty with kind of the marketing and just kind of growing from there. So so far it's been pretty successful since it's kind of been challenged, basically from Mayor Call and Mayor Miller. And the committee has been very successful, I believe. But this fund is basically one or two costs. We have basically service for the first student, and then we have $3,000 in there for advertising. We do get state aid, and it's basically about 56% of our cost. So that's the state aid. There's a formula with that, and the rest of it. We do have the Walmart donation, which will be going away here fairly soon. I think we have one more year left, and then it's gone after that. Otherwise, that's all I have.
Does anybody have any questions? Everybody looks like they're ready for bed.
I had one. So with TIF 2 closing, was it still making donations to the other TIFs? And if so, well,
Legally, we can't do it. It was after 10 years. You can only do it for 10 years.
Oh, okay.
We met her. So I set the payment structures up, so the last 2 years, we'd still get a ton of money. So that's why we have a large payment back to the general fund and renew Monona. But we only were allowed to do it for 10 years.
okay. So the funds, are there any of the districts that need donations from other districts?
Not right away, but TIF 4 and 5 are still kind of, for the future is one of those things that we have to see where that lands with us. They're probably, TIF 5 is probably the one that we might have still need more donor district in the near future, probably 5 to 6, 7 years, we might need some donor district there, depending on how the increments go. The TIFs will take a little bit of a hit next year, because once we hit all that value from TIF 2 on the tax roll, it'll reduce their allocation a little bit because it's based on the mill rate. The mill rate should go down, and so should the TIF increment. So it will have a little bit of a negative effect on the other TIFs. It's complicated.
Anyone else? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I guess.
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
On that.